Hey there, and thanks for stopping by another Incarnate video. Today's video, I want to give you 10 tips if you've been playing the closed beta, or if you have plans to joining the closed beta through the primal tokens that somebody might give you, or if you're going to purchase them. So let's jump right in. All right, so I've got a slightly different recording setup today. I'm actually getting my office prepared for that sweet Judge PC that I won the other week. I have to build a desk. It's getting shipped this week, but right now we're just kind of in the interim, so we can deal with it for a couple of videos. Anyways, let's get into the first tip. So if you've been playing the closed beta up to this point, or you plan on playing the closed beta soon, or even the open beta, you got to remember, this is still beta. It's not a fully finished game. It's not fully polished. There's going to be balancing stuff that needs to be fixed. There are going to be bugs, and those bugs are going to cause soft locks or even hard locks of the game. So please set your expectations to that level, because it's not going to be flawless. There are going to be issues. Be good and actually report those issues. That helps the developers actually fix what's going on, provide your feedback, and the best way to do that is to join the Skeleton Hand Incarnate Discord and post in the bug report channel. So please do that if you notice them. And again, set your expectations for beta. Okay, now that your expectations are set, join the game, start the tutorial, and do the tutorial before you do anything else. If you try to skip the tutorial and you just move on to different screens, even if you played in the alpha, you're going to cause some minor issues just getting started. So the best thing to do is when you first start the game, do the tutorial. And if you have primals, do the tutorial first. Then back out, go import your primals into the game through the Incarnate website, and then come back into the game and you'll see your primals loaded. So start with the tutorial. Otherwise, you're going to have some minor issues. All right, tip 3. There's this cool little button. It says auto. You can click it and the game will play itself. Now just remember here, the AI not finished. It's pretty dicey. It's not going to be optimal. Your run times are going to be long, and there's actually more soft lock potential when you use auto. The other piece of it is if you're coming from games like Raid Shadow Legends or Dragon Champions, other gacha style games, they do have these auto features, but you're not going to learn the game if you hit that auto button, and you're probably going to fail more often than not because the AI isn't that great. Turn off auto. Turn on your brain. Learn to play the game, because it's just going to be that much more enjoyable. You're going to get faster run times. You're going to understand the game. You're going to think of some really insane, cool builds that nobody else has thought of. So yeah, turn off auto. Don't start with it. You're not going to win the game just by playing auto, especially when you start hitting those hard levels. So that's tip 3. All right, on to the next tip. As you go through the tutorial, you're going to end up getting a starter Incarnate. That starter is going to have all rare Archon parts. So it's going to look something similar to what's on the screen. You're going to have Terra Sculpt, and you're going to have Genesis on the soul. Instead of Wall on the body, you're going to have Rift Warped. This Incarnate is really good. Do not void it. Do not reclaim it. Play with it. Try to look for something called Boundless Expanse, and your Genesis soul ability is going to have more AoE. And try not to YOLO into mobs, because if you YOLO into mobs, they're going to swarm you, and you're going to die. Be smart. Again, turn off that auto, turn on your brain. Sit back, use Genesis from a distance, and you'll be just fine getting through normal. Tip number 5. This one's kind of a combination, but they're both really important. You kind of need some sort of sustain or heals to get through all of the campaign. It's going to make it a lot easier to survive. So don't just go build huge DPS or damage builds. It's not going to work going through all of hard and all of insane campaign. And that's the goal. You want to do that so you can get a free legendary at the end of that insane mode. So be sure to bring some heals and sustain and build a certain incarnates that way. And again, this is a combination kind of tip. Look at this sustain incarnate that I have. You got Oasis, heals allies and presence 10% of my max HP, and it gives them regen. Furnace, again, another heal ability. And Hunger, this one helps me get my max HP higher, so my Oasis and Furnace do more healing. Now, the biggest part about this is I only have one epic piece on this build. I've got a common, a rare, and an epic piece. In this game, legendary does not always mean better. Get that in your head right now. That's the biggest tip coming from this, is that legendary is not always better. So be sure to look at all the builds, check out all the synergy, and build things that make sense, even if they are common or rare parts. You can see that I only have one legendary incarnate up here. Right now, I've got a few epics, and then the rest of them, not the rest of them, but a lot of them are rares. And I'm starting to build out my common incarnates as well. So again, bring sustains and heals, and a lot of the good sustain heals, they're not going to be legendary. You see a perfect example of this, where this is a really strong build for a support character, and it's only rare. All right, this next tip is about a type of incarnate that you're going to want to build in this game to clear normal, hard, insane, doesn't matter, but you're going to want to clear waves faster with this build. So you're going to want to build something with a teleport. And what I mean by that is these parts will allow you to teleport, and they will ignore barriers in the game or on the maps. So they won't ignore gaps in spacing on the maps, but if there's a barrier that prevents you from walking up spaces or walking to a certain location on the map, the teleport will ignore that barrier and go right through it. It's very important because some of these maps will take upwards to 30 to 60 minutes to complete, and bringing something that has a teleport build will actually make that much, much faster, saving you a lot of time, especially if you want to grind a certain level. So here's an example of my primary incarnate that I focused on. It's got Rain, which teleports you to the highest space in your presence. Event Horizon, same thing, teleports me to my highest space in my presence. And Iajitsu, which is a teleportation in a line. So do yourself a favor, build something with teleport, and your runs will be a lot faster. All right, and on to tip 7. So in this tip, we're going to talk about gameplay tips. And I'm actually going to bring that teleporting incarnate into this level. She's right here. That's Rain. That's Event Horizon. And that's Iajitsu. All have teleport abilities. So let's go ahead and begin this map. Okay. So that's my ally champion that we get through the storyline that's helping out in this level on Insane. So here's where the teleport is actually important. If I did not have a teleport ability on this map, I would have to use some ability that could go in a line or go into AoE here that wasn't going to be ruined by this line of sight. So if I had an AoE ability that was ruined by line of sight, I could not attack these incarnates. What I would have to do is I would have to travel here, travel all the way up these stairs, and then navigate around. And that takes multiple turns. And multiple turns could take, 30 seconds to cycle through. In this case, what I can do is I can teleport up there and do some damage. So I'm going to tell you 2 tips here, because the first one is you can select the space that you want to move. So I click there, and then you can hover over abilities to actually get a preview of what that ability range is like. So in this case for Rain, when I hover over, I saw that I can get up to this space. And because Rain is based on my highest space in my presence, I'm not going to be able to teleport here, but I can teleport up behind this Judge and Titan based incarnate, or my enemy there. So if I go back here, and let's say I select a different square, and I do the preview, you can see that there are no spaces that are highlighted red up on those ledges. That's because Rain cannot get there. So definitely make sure you take the time to click the space, see where the abilities are. That way you can see where you can actually attack. So Iijitsu in this case, I can actually attack both of those enemy incarnates from that space because they're in a line from where I end up. If I select this square, you can see they are no longer attackable. So it's always good to click that square and preview your abilities. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and click one space, move there, and now you can see those two spaces are highlighted. So we're going to go ahead and attack it, and one shot. Nice. All right, so the next gameplay tip that I have is you can move in any path that you wish. Now, depending on the spaces and the path you choose, you may not be able to get to the presence that's highlighted or your move that's highlighted. So I could go straight line here and get there just fine. But I can also click through the path I want to click, to move rather. And you can see that it's starting to darken up because I can no longer get there, but I still have the ability to move elsewhere. So I can go all the way like this, and now I have selected my path to go forward 1, right 1, up 3, and then left 1. So if I click that and lock that movement in, that's the path my incarnate takes. Now on this map, it's not particularly important, but on maps like, or bosses like Contra, where you have mines that you have to avoid, or if you want to use something like the Eternal called Blood Runner and bleed someone by going through an adjacent space, you want to be able to control your path so you can bleed them or avoid the mines in the case of the boss called Contra. All right, and on to tip number 8. This one is going to be kind of about managing your inventory and making sure you don't make silly mistakes like I already have. So if you go to your haul, you can see all of your incarnates that you have in your inventory. You will notice that I showed you the non-starter because I accidentally and unintentionally voided, aka deleted, my starter Archon champion. So I no longer have that champion, but I could build it again. Not a problem. If I got those parts, I could definitely build it again. So not a big deal there. And this build works just fine. It's very comparable to the starter. So I'm happy with this one. And that's why I brought it all the way up to 6-star and 60. So if you want to reclaim parts from your incarnate, you are going to use the reclaim button. Now what reclaim does is it will take all of the parts that you have on a build. It will take all of the Eternals that you have on a build and bring them back to your inventory. So it does not delete them. It brings them back to your inventory. Now that is going to have a cost associated with it. So we can go ahead and click reclaim. And you're going to see here that I'm going to get back all of these parts. I will get back all of these Eternals, but it will cost me 217,000 dust. Now I have a little bit over 3 million, about 3.3 million of dust right now. So it wouldn't be a terribly big hit, but I don't want to reclaim this. If you did want to reclaim this, hit the reclaim button, you get everything back, and you can use those parts in Eternals and other builds. Now just a note here, if you do have this lock icon locked, so if I can show you that here on one of my incarnates, here we go. If it's locked and you try to reclaim and you hit the reclaim, it's going to give you a loading or error. It's just going to hang. So if you see that, you're not going to actually be able to click the X to get back. Just hit the escape button. So if I hit escape, it brings me back to the main menu. That's the way to get around that little error if you see it. So going into the Veil, again, we're talking about management of resources. Let's look at all of our Eternals. So if you go to the Eternals piece, this is where you can actually delete your Eternals to get resources. And in this case, Eternals, when they're deleted or voided, turn into thread. And thread is kind of your premium currency in the game right now. So the tip here is you can pretty much get rid of any 3-star and below Eternal without too much hesitation. Now, if you don't have a copy of those Eternals, it's probably best to keep one just in case. But if you're gonna probably get copies throughout the game. So if you don't like to manage your inventory, you're pretty safe deleting or voiding those 3-star Eternals and below. You can see I've got multiple copies at the 5 and 6-star Ascension levels. So by playing and playing the game, you're going to get a lot of drops here, and you'd be really unlucky if you didn't get at least one of those Eternals while you're grinding at 4-star or above. Now, even 4-star is probably a level of Eternals that you don't necessarily need, but that's when you can start saving and trying to build these sets. I would rather use a 4-star Eternal that is in the right set that gives me additional bonuses than using a 5 or 6-star Eternal that is in the wrong set or even has the wrong focus gems. So that's a tip here is 3-star and below Eternals are pretty safe to void. Abilities, however, it's a little different. For abilities, you want to make sure you try to hold on and keep all of your legendary and epic pieces. They are harder to come by when you're pulling echoes and getting parts that you want to build. Okay. So unless you have a ton of copies and you don't think you're going to be building multiple Incarnate builds with these epic and legendary parts, you're going to want to hold on to them and don't void them. Again, voiding them deletes them and gets you resources. So be careful with that. 2-star and below rare and common pieces, probably safe to void and get resources back. You're going to pick up enough of them throughout your playing that if you think of a build and you don't have the part, you're probably going to pick one up within 100 echoes or so. So it's pretty safe to get rid of it, and you're not going to hurt yourself too bad for the rare and common pieces. But the epic and legendary, definitely hold on to them. Even if they're 1-star, even if they're 2-star, you're not going to get a lot of them. So you're going to want to build them up using resources. And if you don't have them, you can't build them. So hold on to them. They're pretty important to keep in your inventory. All right, that is tip number 8. All right, tip number 9. We're going to talk about focus gems. So if you go to Eternals, you can see that they have slots on the back. They're called focus slots, and you can fill them with focus gems. So if I go ahead and click on upgrade, you can see that this Eternal has been fully unlocked. So all the slots are open, and I have gemmed every slot on this piece. The tip here is don't worry about filling these slots with focus gems until you start getting into kind of a roadblock where you don't have enough damage or you don't have enough speed to keep up with the enemy incarnates. Let them sit in your inventory, get used to the game, and then start thinking about how you want to improve your incarnate through these focus gems. The focus gems give you additional stats, and that's how we get our incarnates to be more powerful in this game. It's like gear in other games where you equip gear and you get more stats. It's the focus gems in this game that has that function. So you can see I have a couple builds with full focus gems just because they were placeholders and I needed to get a little bit more stats to make progress in the game. But I also have a number of builds that you can see here, none of these stars are pink, indicating that they are filled with focus gems. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm focusing on 1 or 2 just to start with, and it costs resources to equip those gems and replace those gems. So my tip here for the focus gems, again, is don't focus on the focus gems right away. Put them into one incarnate that you know you're going to be doing most of your clearing with. Save the rest for your other builds and wait until you start getting more comfortable with the game and understanding the stats of the game to start adding focus gems to other incarnates and builds, because it takes a lot of resources to do that. And you're just going to waste a lot of resources at the very beginning of the game if you don't wait to do that. So that's tip number 9. All right, tip number 10. If you are coming into the game and you do not have primal builds, I have 6 of them, you're going to have to start with 3-star incarnates. So the tip here is to focus ascending only one of those incarnates at a time. If you start spreading your resources and ascending multiple incarnates, you're going to start wasting your resources because you can clear most of the stuff with just a single incarnate if you do it right. So make sure you focus on ascending to 6-star level 60, because you're going to get a ton of extra stats by going to level 60. And the only way you can get to 60 is if you ascend those pieces. And when I say ascend, we'll look at an example here. You can see this incarnate here is a 3-star incarnate. So to get 6-star incarnates, you need all of these parts to have 6 stars. And to get 6 stars, you need to ascend from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, right? When you ascend, you get extra stats when you get your overall ascension level to 4, 5, or 6 stars. Okay, so if you ascend multiple incarnates to only 4-star, you're losing out on a bunch of extra stats that you could have on one incarnate had you leveled it to 60 through ascending to 6-star. So don't make the mistake of spreading your resources out too thin. You can see that aside from my primal incarnates, which came with 6-star parts fully populated, I have only focused on 2 really incarnates that have gotten to 6-star ascension. Those are going to be 2 really solid builds, so I focused on those. You can see I have another solid build that is at 5-star, and you also see that I've got a number of builds that are 6-star, but they're rare or common, which are much easier to get to 6-star. But these are parts that I am keeping basically in order to reclaim them and build later at 6-star if I want to. All right, bonus tip time. A couple of bonus tips actually. And they're pretty much shameless self-promotions, but I still think they're going to help you. So I'm building a website, denofbluebear.com. And I've got a nice little tool that can actually help you build incarnate builds without actually being in the game. So I've taken a lot of the game data from the developers and put it online. So if you go to the incarnate menu and you go to the tools incarnate builder, that will bring you to this nice little tool. It allows you to choose parts from the game by selecting the drop downs, and then it gives you a list of Eternals that you can choose for those specific parts. Now the tool is a little limited in a couple ways, and we'll go through that. We'll show you an example here. So in the game, you cannot equip the same Eternal on the same incarnate. So in this case, the tool allows you to select those Eternals. It's just not coded 100% yet, but it's still pretty functional. The other piece of it is that the game only allows you to spend a maximum amount of Eternal points when you equipped the Eternals. So each Eternal that you equip has a cost associated with it to equip. So in this case, on your left-hand side on these parts, it's showing you the amount of EP or Eternal points that that part is contributing to the overall maximum budget. So in this case, Cunning has 5, Frenzy 6, and Geokinesis 5. For a total of 16 Eternal points that you can actually spend when you're making this build. In this case, we have a total of 8 Eternal points that are being spent with this build. So why don't we go ahead and find some other more expensive pieces here. We know that Temporal Shard's pretty expensive. We know that, let's see, Stygian Eye is also pretty expensive. Okay, so the tool will allow you to select these Eternals, but again, we have a maximum amount of Eternal points that we can spend. In this case, we can only spend 16 Eternal points. in this build, I am spending 20. So it does have limitations. Just make sure that this EP cost on the top left-hand corner here is lower or equal to this EP budget that you have. Now on the right-hand side, you can see that these are the stats that this build will give you at level 60. It's important to note this is at level 60. So if you do build this in game, it's not going to match until level 60. But it gives you a good indication of whether or not this build is going to be high in HP or low in defense or low in attack and high in defense. So it gives you a really good understanding, at least without having to be in the game, of what the Incarnate's going to look like from an overall stats perspective. In addition, if you don't have the parts in the game, you can come here and you can see what all the parts are on the website and get a little bit more details of what might look like from a synergy perspective. So if you were really interested in one of these parts, it only gives you the ability text. It doesn't give you what the stats of that part contributes to the overall build. For that, you would want to go to Incarnate and Parts or Eternals, either one, very similar. But if you go to the parts, as an example, you will end up seeing the whole part listing that is in the game. A lot of these are not populated with a lot of additional detail yet. So in this case, they all have the ability details. They all have the stats and the affinity, all of the things that make up that part. The only thing that a lot of them are missing are kind of my thoughts and some of the thoughts of the other moderators in the Incarnate Discord of what their strong features are or what they're weak at doing, as well as what we might consider pairing these parts with. So as an example, we can go back to the parts page and we can go to Earthlands, and this is what I want them all to look like. It has some more text of where we think it's going to be strong, where it's going to be weak, and what parts and Eternals you might consider pairing with it. And you can click these images or the buttons and it will take you directly to that information. So again, still working on this. It's not being done in a silo. I'm working with some really smart folks to kind of bring you some good information and help you start the game a little bit easier than if you were just to try to figure this all out on your own. Now, again, it's not going to be gospel because there are going to be some really interesting builds that I won't capture here, and I hope you share them. Especially leave some comments down there. Nobody's left comments yet, and I'm excited to see how that feature works out on the site as well. The last piece for this kind of bonus tip, if you will, is if you are having trouble kind of thinking of builds, why don't you head to the Primal Incarnates page. If we go to the Primal Incarnates page, it will list all of the 125 builds that came with the Primal Mint. So you can go through here. These builds have been specifically handpicked by the development team because they provide synergy. And some of these builds were really interesting when I went through them and hadn't really thought about before. So if you want some ideas for some builds, the Primal Incarnate page is a good one to visit. It's not going to have all 6 Eternals there. They only have 3 loaded, but it gives you a really good idea of what the devs think are going to be strong synergy. So check that out. Okay, that's enough shameless self-promotion. Hopefully you thought this video was informative. I really like doing these type of videos to help people out. That's my whole goal with this. If you did like the video, consider subscribing. Consider hitting that like button. The more people that do one or both of those things, the more this video will get out there. And hopefully we'll start building a really strong community around this amazing game. And again, that's the biggest goal of this, is just trying to get the game out there and build a great community. So with that, I'm going to stop rambling and we'll see you in the next one, which should hopefully be a pretty juicy video, because that should be the desk build that I'm putting together, the reorganization of my office, and the unboxing of the Judge PC. I'm pretty excited for that one, and I hope you are too. We'll see you in the next one.